Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, the first bill I have is Senate Bill 324. This has to do with the pipelines. So Mountain Valley Pipeline in my area and Atlantic Coast Pipeline up the valley. What we're doing here, first of all, let me point out that in my area, this is strictly a bipartisan issue. The boards of supervisors of Giles County, Montgomery County, and Roanoke County opposed the pipeline, and the city of Roanoke City Council opposed the pipeline. So you see where we're coming from. And there's a lot of support for doing something to slow down the pipeline. The bill would do the following. First of all, it would provide a little more accountability here in Virginia over by the SCC, or some little more oversight by the SCC in terms of issuing a certificate of public convenience and necessity to determine whether or not the pipeline is for public use. Before the pipeline companies could even enter people's property, they'd have to have a certificate of public convenience and necessity. The second thing it would do, it would provide some accountability with regard to the entering of people's properties. People are very upset about what has happened with regard to entering people's properties. It would give them the right to go to court to have an injunctive relief, civil action for damages of $500 a day in case the rules are being violated by the pipeline companies, and it would provide actual treble damages in case of actual damages to the property. Right now there's actual damages you can get, but not treble damages, and that it would authorize the landowner to be able to accompany the surveyors on the property to photograph and to find out what they're doing on their property. And it's mostly important the fact that it would require that those persons representing the pipeline companies that are going on the land to survey the property, that they identify themselves. They're showing up and not even telling people who they are, coming on the property, running off the property, not even telling who they are. And it would also require that the pipeline companies provide information they got on this when they went on the property to do the surveying. The data, reports, maps, tables, laboratory analysis, and other documentation reflecting the results of surveying the property. I have here a brand new, very distinguished delegate from Giles County, Montgomery County, and Radford City, Chris Hurst, who's been involved in this as well, and then Rick Shingles, who is a retired professor at Virginia Tech, who lives in Newport, directly affected by the pipeline, to weigh in and give you their views on this bill.
Senator Edwards, I believe Senator Norman has a question for you.
Senator Edwards, help me because I haven't been following this as carefully as I should. Did the Virginia Supreme Court take up an issue about the right of entry on properties for a survey? And
I believe the legislation we passed in, I believe, 2004, that allows them to go on the property, that was taken up. This would change this, requiring this SCC to issue a certificate of public convenience and necessity.
So, Mr. Chairman, the Supreme Court just took it up and looked at the 2004 law. Is that?
As I recall, I think that's what it was.
Thank you.
Yeah. Delegate Chris, I'd be glad to answer any questions on. Okay.
Not right now. Does anybody have any? Delegate Hurst, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, it's not lost on me that I'm a freshman member and am speaking as a member of the other body too. So your indulgence in letting me address the committee is greatly appreciated. And I'm very happy to be here to advocate on behalf of Senator Edwards' bill. And I have a similar language, identical language in the House side as well. But felt it was important to come and articulate reasons why I believe this bill should be approved to have full consideration of the entire Senate so that we can try and address some problems that have been raised during the pipeline surveying process, not only for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline, but for the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which cuts right through the heart of my district and parts of Giles and Montgomery counties. In particular, I think it's important to note that this really is trying to continue to enumerate more protections for landowners and to help codify more rights for private property owners. Senator Norman, you brought up the Supreme Court case that happened here over the summer, and that was testing the constitutionality of this original statute that I know, Mr. Chairman, you actually carried back in 2004. and seeing whether it was in conflict with the constitutional amendment that Senator Obenshain helped pass back in 2012, right? So there were some issues that your former colleague, then Senator William Mims, who helped approve the 2004 bill, now he's a justice on the Supreme Court, he did say that there were some transgressions that happened during the surveying process that I think need to be fully evaluated more, those are my words now, with this bill. Specifically related to subsection C, which gives better protections for landowners to know exactly when these surveyors are going to be showing up on property. Currently right now, and we have seen this time and time again with multiple landowners who have been affected during this surveying process, that while there has been notice that the surveyors will arrive on property, we currently don't have any metric of being able to say with any specificity the exact date and time when those surveyors will be arriving. And so many private property owners have been taking off of work, have had to deal with child care issues, have been, I think, unfairly burdened through this process right now. And this just helps give better protections for those landowners, specifically in subsection C. There are additional subsections that are added that I still think help give more rights to landowners during this process. I don't believe that any of the modifications made to the statute would impede the ability of any surveyor to do their job, would impede the ability of any natural gas project to be able to be enacted or actually constructed here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. This purely is about giving more rights to landowners so that they feel like they are at the table for these processes and not on the menu. And with that, I will leave it up for any questions that the committee may have.
Are there questions? Delegate Hertz, would you agree with me this bill goes way beyond merely notifying landowners?
There are many things that this bill does. I am in support of all of the code section changes that would happen with this bill. But just to, again, underscore kind of the basic fundamental value of trying to better protect landowners and private property rights, that's why I drew attention specifically to subsection C, especially as it pertains to the recent Supreme Court ruling that happened over the summer that subsection C changes with Senator Edwards' bill would help codify into law.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Senator Edwards, do you have others?
Yes, distinguished retired professor emeritus of Virginia Tech, Rick Shingles, who lives in Newport, which is right in Giles County, and he can tell you exactly what's going on with the pipeline there. Rick, thank you for being here. He's also involved with Preserve Giles County.
Okay. Professor Shingles, welcome.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. And maybe one way I could help is to answer questions about property rights, landowners' experiences with the surveys, because I think the way the survey laws actually works on the ground is not maybe the way it was intended. And a lot of what we're trying to do is make that a stronger bill in terms of stronger in the sense of not only balancing against property rights, but stronger in the sense of restoring legitimacy to that law, which citizens in where I live don't see it as legitimate. And there's been a lot of confrontations between, you probably read about them, between citizens and surveyors. They're often heated. The police or the sheriff try and intervene and are put in a very awkward situation, not really trained to deal with it. And some clarification of that and some specificity in protecting the rights of property owners would make it stronger legislation. So, and I can elaborate on this, but I really want to make myself available to answer because this bill was written by citizens, by landowners in large part, in response to that, to try and go over the complaints that landowners had and then use that to try and make the bill stronger and more balanced.
Thank you. Are there questions? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Several others here.
Yeah, I see that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Bob Shippey. I'm a member of the Virginia Sierra Club. We support the bill. I think the patron and as well as Delegate Hurst have articulated it better than I could, but I think you hear about these conflicts, and there's no reason for that. I think the reason for the conflicts today is there's an out-of-balance situation between what utility companies are allowed to do and the rights of landowners. So I think this bill restores that balance. I think it's a very logical step that can eliminate the conflict and allow business to do what they need to do and protect landowners.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, Peter Anderson again with Appalachian Voices. We support the bill. What's happened with the law as currently written is residents and property owners throughout the corridors of the proposed Mountain Valley and Atlantic Coast pipelines have had surveyors and subcontractors of pipeline companies trespassing on their land and causing damage without any recourse. This bill is a good bill. It would add a much needed layer of protection to protect people's property rights. It's a very reasonable amendment requiring a company to get a certificate from the commission if it wants to enter property even when permission has not been granted. It would give extra legal protections in the event surveyors actually cause damage to somebody's property. We think it's a very reasonable amendment to the current law, and we think anyone concerned with property rights could easily support it. So we ask that you support this bill.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Trias Lockwood with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters. This bill protects property rights and we support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Harrison Wallace with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. We also support this bill and support anything that can help the rights of landowners.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace. Any others? Is there opposition to this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Murray on behalf of Dominion Energy. I'll speak very briefly. I'll start with the patrons' jumping off point for the bill. The bill is aimed to slow down the pipeline. In our case, we're the developer of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. The patron, and I think several of the speakers are also referring to another pipeline project that's going on. From Christmas until just last week, we had a real-world test for 2 weeks of the need for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. I'm most familiar with our service territory. It has unfortunately long been the case due to a shortage of pipeline capacity that from Williamsburg east, large customers need to be curtailed during times of very cold weather. This time, not only was it Williamsburg east, we actually had very large industrial customers elsewhere on our system that had to be curtailed. That meant they weren't able to do business as normal to run their manufacturing business due to inability to get gas, because the gas was needed for home heating. And it was also needed for electric generation. With regard to electric generation, we are still tallying up the costs beyond business as usual. And, we certainly budget for winter weather. So beyond the normal sort of winter weather, suffice to say, a very significant customer costs were incurred. It's a straight pass through to customers. Fuel, this has long been the policy, whatever the regulatory regime has been, that fuel is a straight pass-through. It's simply adding up the math, and we had very significant incremental costs from the lack of pipeline capacity. So in the case of Dominion service territory, slowing up the pipeline means a longer period of time when business customers can't operate in a normal fashion due to lack of natural gas during cold weather, and when customers are paying much more than they should. At one point, we were paying $175 a unit for natural gas, and that was almost exclusively due to pipeline constraints. The commodity went up, to be sure, from typically around $3 to mid-single digits, but nothing like the $175 we were paying. We were paying that. It's like some of these tolls you've been hearing about. So imagine a peak congestion toll that ran continuously for 2 weeks. That was the situation we had on our system. And then finally, with regard to just the mechanics of the bill, I think you would have a lot of litigation about, is providing gas to an industrial customer as part of a pipeline project, is that a deviation from an exclusively public use? And more basically, interstate natural gas pipelines have long been federally regulated. So essentially what you're doing in this bill is setting up a regime to have a state-level certificate process before you can do the necessary due diligence that is required to apply for a federal permit. And in closing, I'll emphasize that what we're talking about here is surveying. And surveying a route well is in everyone's interest, because if there are historic resources on a property, if there's wetlands, that all goes into whether the route goes there or not. And absent surveying, you're not going to have as good an information in proposing a route to FERC, and you may have the project go areas where it would be less appropriate than other areas, absent the ability to survey. And for those reasons, Mr. Chairman, we would respectfully oppose the bill.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ryan Dunn with the Virginia Chamber of Commerce.
we respect the intentions behind the bill. We've long said we want this process with the natural gas pipelines to be done both environmentally soundly and also with the rights of property owners. The concern we have with this bill is that it will actually slow down the process. We had concerns with this bill last year under the intentions that anything that slows up the process we're opposed to, but also that doesn't allow for surveyors to do the job, which entails our second part, which is being the most environmentally friendly way we can do it. If you can't let surveyors get into the process and lay out the most least intrusive route of which to go, this is going to not be either environmentally friendly or that of the rightly of the landowner. So we ask for your opposition. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, David Ogren of Capital Results. I'm here today representing EQT, who's the operator of the Mountain Valley Pipeline. I'd like to associate myself with the remarks of Mr. Murray. I'd like to make one additional point. If you look at the bill on line 40, you'll see a provision striking actual damages and substituting treble damages. I think that shows you the real intent behind the bill, which is to be punitive. I'm not aware of any other provision in law in my 36 years of practicing law and 3 years in law school that applies punitive damages to simple negligence. There's no action, there's no requirement for intentional or willful action here, which is what you normally see when punitive damages are required. So thank you. We oppose the bill.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Charlie Jackson from Jackson West Consulting, representing the Laborers International Union of North America. And I want to start by saying it's not every day that the labor union agrees with the Chamber of Commerce, but I want to echo their sentiments and urge you to oppose this bill. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline will create jobs in Chesapeake, in Norfolk, in Suffolk, Brunswick, Prince Edward, Cumberland, and other counties across Virginia. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Virginia construction labor earns on average of $14.31 per hour. Atlantic Coast Pipeline workers will earn a minimum of $20 per hour and 45 days per diem, including retirement benefits. Often lost in the conversations about pipelines in Virginia is the jobs created by this project. While we think Lake Dominion and the Chamber has said that this bill will slow down the project, we encourage you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Connor Woodrich. I'm here on behalf of Columbia Gas of Virginia. I would like to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and just point out that we will be a customer of the ACP pipeline, and we have severe capacity constraints throughout our system right now. That will be alleviated by it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Rochelle Whitaker, and I represent Virginia Natural Gas, and we also oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Julia Carlin Hammond on behalf of the Virginia Oil and Gas Association, and I will associate with my comments with all of the people who are far more smart and articulate. We oppose.
Senator Edwards, you'd like to wrap up?
I would. The two things that the opponents have not even mentioned, landowners' rights is one, and the second has to do with the environment, both of which are the biggest issues in this whole thing. And this is why this bill is put in, to protect landowners' rights, but also protect the environment and the way of life of the people who live in the New River Valley and up the valley with regard to the Atlantic Coast Pipeline as well. So I urge you to pass this bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sproul.
To the commission, I want you all to listen. I'm here to support this. Now, I'm going to tell you what's going on right now. This is not from any customer. I live in Chesapeake, in the Georgetown section of Chesapeake. And Senator Norman is the section that I've been trying to save up enough money to move in that community. Real nice community, mixed community. And they are putting the pipelines down. The first complaint we got was they called and say, somebody's in my backyard doing a survey, and they did not contact me. What do? I say, call the police. Number one. And then we got into it, and we checked into it, that the pipeline that they proposed, they're going through 4 sections of the community. And some of the pipelines, that these pipelines are going under the right-of-way that Dominion Power has this big power line, the gas pipelines, and they're using their right-of-way. And they were saying, why would Dominion Power allow them to use the right-of-way to put the gas line down that will cause a problem. As it goes forward, in one part of the community, the pipeline will be less than 5 feet away from the house. So then we call, say, if they do that, they cannot put the pipeline under the easement, the main easement, on the right towards the homeowners. So we are saying, how deep would that gas line be? And they came with the attitude, it's like, well, it's that way, or else we couldn't, you call it eminent domain? So forth. Now, so we were saying, so we had problems. So finally, the city they got together because we tried everything possible. The gas line came down, and they were real nice about it. The Million Power came down trying to explain to the people in that community how safe it was. And we were saying, well, how can you do that? And then after we get the notice of what you're going to do, then you're going to meet because we are really then saying, how come no one met with us beforehand? Why wait until we ready to say it, then talk with us? We finally got some relief. We all put in together, those of us who got a lot of money, and the SCC. Finally, I don't know who they are, but we got a hold of them, and we got a lawyer. And they are checking into it, and they were saying that we do have some rights. And I understand as far as what the gas company is trying to do, or the Million Power trying to do as far as modernize things for us. But what about the people who live there? Do we have any rights also? It's happening right now, and we are carrying them to court. They came in to survey the property, and they did not ask not one person until we start complaining. So now, so when you want to modernize everything, what about the people who live there, who save their money to buy a house for $400,000 and some more? Do we have a right to say, come and talk to us without you saying to us, well, this is what we're going to offer you, and I can use that word eminent domain. So, and that's not right. I appreciate the company, and nobody can say in here that I support the Million Power and the gas company. Been there for 24 years. But when you're wrong, you're wrong. So I'm saying, so I'm supporting your bill because I do believe that the citizens, they do have a right. And what we are doing now is doing these things because our friends, as I would have called the gas company and the Million Power, our friends saying that it can make it better for everybody. But what about those who live in that community? What about those who bought a home that can't afford to move nowhere else? What about them? And saying, so you're going to come in, at least I should have gotten a letter. Not me, because I don't live that the pipeline. They should have gotten a letter saying, hey, we're going to be out in 2 weeks or next week, and this is what we propose to do. That was not taken. So we are going to court, and this will help a whole lot. Don't know how far we're going, but at least we are saying to the Million Power and to the gas company, if you're going to do something, you have the right, but you still have the right to notify me. Don't just do it. Let me ask you, what are you doing in my backyard? So I'm asking y'all, please support this bill. Thank you kindly.
Senator Chafin. Mr. Chairman, and it may come as a shock to this committee, or maybe not, but there are other areas in Virginia that have had pipelines, large pipelines, transmission lines that cross their lands. And I'm talking about areas outside the coalfield region, other parts of Virginia that have been affected by projects similar to what are envisioned in these two projects that have garnered some small amount of discussion. And I can tell the committee that one of those such projects was the East Tennessee natural gas transmission line that was put in the 1980s, and it went out of Southwest Virginia and into, of course, into Tennessee and other parts. It crossed two separate farms of my family's, and also a commercial property that we had, and it's still there to this day. Now, there was a lot of due process issues. There were issues with needing to get surveys and needing to get people on the property to try to lessen the impact of that project, okay? And I can tell you, I was a young lawyer at that time, and I wasn't thrilled that we were going to have pipelines across some of our properties, but we went along with it for the greater good of all, okay, for the greater good of all, for this state and the nation. And it's for that reason I've looked at Senator Edwards' bill, and I understand what it's like to have localities that oppose something and be elected from those localities, and I certainly understand the situation. But I believe that this bill would roll back the hands of time. This bill would change, be a sea change from what we've been operating on for a number of years here in the Commonwealth, and it's for that reason that I make a motion to PBI the bill.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the Senate Bill 324 be passed by indefinitely. I just want to make a comment, and this kind of reflects out to your neck of the woods, Senator Edwards. I will note there is a pipeline closing, and it's called Spur 25. It leaves the Colonial Pipeline and delivers diesel and gasoline through Senator Newman's area, down Route 460 all the way to Roanoke, and it is closing. It is shut down, so the pipeline opponents should be ecstatic. Let me tell you the reality of what's going to go on now. There are only two other terminals that you can draw this fuel oil from to deliver it. It's going to be either here in Richmond or down in Greensboro, North Carolina. To replace the volume delivered by that pipeline, I'm told up to 300 fuel trucks a day will travel up and down that corridor to be able to replace the fuel, the diesel and gasoline necessary for that area. Now, I can't gauge environmental hazards, but I will venture to guess that this is far more of environmental intrusiveness by having this pipeline shut down than it would be, not to mention the personal safety risks involved by moving 300 tractor trailer loads of fuel up and down. And as Senator Sasslaw so eloquently just stated in my ear, it's estimated that the price of gasoline and diesel fuel along that corridor will go up by $0.05 a gallon.
Mr. Chairman,
So that's kind of the inputs of all of that. Senator Sproul.
question to you and
Absolutely.
Senator Norman.
Sir.
If this was going across your backyard, would you be saying the same thing?
I will say this, Senator Sproul, I have a gas pipeline goes right to my house. It doesn't
No,
bother
not
me
this
at all.
this kind. I had that too.
I understand.
I had that too, sir.
I have no objections to it, Senator Sproul. I've seen where the pipelines are. In fact, I probably drove over 15 of them coming up here between natural gas and fuel pipelines up and down. Did have one go right underneath my shipyard, Senator Sproul, or right adjacent to it under one of the major projects to ensure that we had enough gas in our area to stay warm, and that was put in by Virginia Natural Gas underneath the Hampton Roads Channel. Right through the shipping channels, right past my shipyard. I had absolutely no objection. In fact, I welcomed it. It now travels over to Craney Island, over to Old Dominion University, and ensures that your area, as well as the rest of Southampton Roads, has sufficient natural gas, even though we just found out in this latest cold snap that probably doesn't get it when Anheuser-Busch just had to shut down entirely due to a total lack of gas due to the demands from residential customers. That's the crisis that we're in right now in Hampton Roads. And if you expect the economy to grow, and if you expect all the things that all of us say during our campaigns to come true, in terms of keeping jobs, in terms of growing the economy, and in terms of diversifying the economy, not just in our neck of the woods, but all over the state, we're going to need energy supplies to be able to do that. And the cheapest, cleanest form, next to renewables for generation of electricity, is going to be natural gas. And if we expect to continue to retire these coal plants, as we have, given that there's not going to be a big storage for renewable energy, we're going to need that natural gas and continue to make that conversion over. And I'm going to be supportive of all of these projects. Not only that, but we cannot be totally dependent off Henry Hub natural gas prices coming out of the Gulf of Mexico when we have Marcellus and Utica shale plays up there with much lower prices in natural gas than currently, and we need to get those supplies into Virginia. Otherwise, you're going to hear exactly what Mr. Murray just said in his testimony. We're going to continue to pay these spot prices of gas, which I will remind you is a direct pass-through to you, Senator Sproul, directly to your constituents on their electric bill. no markup, a direct pass of the cost of fuel, and understand what I heard from Bill Murray, that we're paying $3 or $4 a decatherm, jumped up to $130 spot price. That's going right on your bill, my bill, and every other electric customer's bill. So that, just bring that up.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, just got to refocus what this bill is about.
Absolutely. I think we understand what the.
Is the landowner's rights. They feel they're being abused. This will protect the landowner's rights. And in my neck of the woods is a huge environmental issue. We can talk all day long about the need for natural gas, but the prices are low. The chairman of the FERC 3 years ago, former chairman, wrote an article saying that the reason for all this is because the price of natural gas in Europe is high, the price of natural gas in America is low, and they want to ship it overseas. And that has an awful, but that's another issue. The big issue here is landowners' rights, which I think we should all be concerned about.
All right, we refocused again. Thank you, Senator Edwards. We have a motion properly supported to pass the bill by indefinitely. The vote is open. Okay, close the vote.
12 ayes, 1 nay, 1 abstention.
That bill is passed by. Senator Edwards, you have another bill?
I do. Senate Bill 58